guest speaker today is my brother, Tracy Moore. Tracy got his master's several years ago, and from that master's program, he studied the different types of personalities. And I don't want to get into his lesson today, but through all of his studies, he wrote a book. And if you will get this book, it will help you, I believe, not only at work with the people you encounter there, your neighbors, those that you encounter within the church. As you're going to find out, it will also help you to understand your spouse, to understand your children, and to even understand yourself a lot better. And this will be a great blessing to you. Tracy is very special to me because Tracy is one of the greatest encouragers that I have. There have been times where, as a minister, and I think all ministers go through this, we get tired, we get burnt out, we think about doing other things, but Tracy's always been there to cheer me on and to say, no man, you can do this, keep going, and he's one of the reasons why I'm in the ministry today. But I love him, I love his family, and I am so glad that they're with us here today. And so I'm going to turn things over to Tracy.
If you take an egg and you squirt some white vinegar and some lemon juice, you take a little bit of salt and pepper, a little cut of mustard, and some vegetable oil, and you toss it into a food processor, and you get it going. Then you take some oil and you begin to drizzle it as it's being mixed. Voila, you have what? Mayonnaise, right? So then you take it and you put it in a jar and you put it in the refrigerator. I'm glad to be here this morning. I've heard a lot about this church for a long time. My brother talks about many of you, some of you in a positive way. It's great. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm thrilled that he's here. I feel good about him being here, and he loves the people of this church, and he loves the people of this community, and that's just huge. And so, I love my brother, and this is just a big love fest this morning if you hadn't figured that out. But we're going to get into this. You know, when I do marriage counseling and premarital counseling, the very first thing I do is I give them a personality test. And, people who've been a part of the congregation there in Vero for a while, they understand what I do and this kind of thing, and so it's no biggie. But when I do this with people in the community, they almost look at me like, do you understand why I'm here? I'm not really here to, for personality. But the fact is, they are. And what they learn is that when I get your personality test, I can tell you what attracted you to each other. I can tell you things you're arguing about. And I'll do that with people, and they'll look at me like, oh, he's a prophet. And it's like, no, I just know personalities. And here's the thing. After one day of this, you'll be able to go out and you'll be able to pick out people, whether it's your boss or whether it's people that are under you or whether it's your family members, people right here in this church, and you'll be able to say, you know what, I know what your personalities are. Now, one of the things that I do with these personalities is I like to do the car thing, I think. It's not going to work for me. Tell you what, just flash that next slide for me. Isn't technology wonderful? Technology is not good for my personality, if you don't know that. Okay, go to the next one after that. That's Hippocrates. That's what these personalities are based on. If you were not here for the Bible class, you really missed, learning about these 4 personality types. It usually takes me 4 45-minute lessons to do these. We did all 4 of them in 1 45 minutes, so I'm not going to be able to go back and deal with them all. But I can tell you a little bit about these personality types. And what I always do is with the cars, and I think we may even have the wrong slide up, but that's okay. We usually have the cars. And so one of them is a sports car. That's your sanguines, because sanguines are always on the go. They're always fast. They're always moving, you know. They're flashy. They like to be looked at, right? You don't buy a sports car because you're like, you know what, this seems like a sensible thing to have. You do it because it's like, this is cool and I want everybody to think I'm cool. So that's what sanguines do. Cholerics are more like a Hummer. Think of a Hummer in your mind. A Hummer is, you know what, if there's not a road there, I'm going to make a road. I'm going to take charge. They are the leaders. These are the people who can, run over people in the process, but they're just trying to get to a goal. Kind of give you an idea who they are. The melancholies, they're like the smart cars. My wife hates this because she's a melancholy, and she's not a big fan of the smart car. I hope you don't have a smart car. I don't have anything against them. It's just my wife. But anyway, so the smart cars, the melancholies, they are the most analytical. They are the smartest of all the different personality traits. And so they are very organized. They like things in perfection and things of that sort. Then you have the phlegmatics. The phlegmatics, think in terms of like a 1960s VW Bug. Okay, everybody likes the VW Bug, even the little horn, it's even cute. It just puts a smile on your face. There's nothing intimidating about it at all. It's very peaceful. That's what phlegmatics are. They just want peace in the world. They're not looking for conflict, and they just want everybody to like each other, and that's just kind of what they do, and they're very introverted, sweet personalities. In fact, the top two that you see here are extroverts. The two bottom ones, they are the introverts. And to give you kind of an idea. All right, next slide. This is why I believe the temperaments are so very important, because it helps us to understand, newlyweds, to understand the things that they go through. And one statistic that I found was that 90% of all marital conflict is temperament related. And I don't know if it's exactly 90%. I can tell you this, I believe it's very high. And even everything else you look at, you say, no, I thought it was communication. Folks, that comes out of personality. Well, I thought it was, finances. Folks, that comes out of personality. Most of the things that we deal with in a marriage has to do with our personalities. Now, you've always heard that opposites attract. I'm here to tell you, studying personality, that is absolutely true. And maybe you don't have the direct opposite, but maybe there's some secondary things that are blending in there with your personalities that make it. But I'll tell you this, I have never, in all my years of doing premarital counseling and doing counseling for folks and doing these at church and doing these with couples, I've never seen two people who were identical. Never. It may happen. I guarantee you there's somewhere out there. They're probably divorced by now. But the thing is, we like our personality. But here's the other thing. We like small doses of our personality. Okay, sanguines, we like to talk a lot. If it's all sanguines, what's going to happen? We're going to be interrupting each other. We're going to be talking over one another. And, it's exciting at first. In fact, we get together. We're having fun. But then after a while, it's like nobody's listening to me. Everybody wants to talk. So we like each other in small doses. Cholerics are leaders. These are people who have goals to achieve, and we don't all have the same ideals as to how that happens. So guess what happens? They butt heads. Who's going to be the leader? Who's actually going to be the one to see, they need followers. And so then you have the melancholies. The melancholies are introverts. They are the analytical. They are organized. And they're going to be excited because it's like, yeah, I do that organization too. But if you put a bunch of melancholies together and say, I want you to organize this, they all have different ways of doing it. And so they like their own way. They are perfectionists, and then in their mind, they know what perfect is. So then you have the phlegmatics. The phlegmatics, you put them in a room, they may never talk to each other because they're so introverted, they're so shy. They need somebody to pursue them. And so that's why we see that we like each other's personalities, but we like it in small doses, and we're constantly looking for someone who is our opposite, and we find somebody who is our opposite, and there's other things that come into play as well. All of a sudden, you hear the hallelujah chorus, and the lights are coming down from the heaven. It's like, this is the one. This is my soulmate, right? That's what my soulmate. No, you just found your personality that really goes with yours. Because what is a relationship? Folks, what we need in relationship is for someone to help meet my needs, right? And so when we understand that, it makes a lot more sense. And it all corresponds with what happened in the Garden of Eden. Doing this for years, I've done a lot of personality testing, if you will, on the various characters of the Bible. And one day I was thinking, I wonder what the personality traits would be of Adam and Eve. I mean, can we know? Is there enough information there? Did God kind of set it all in motion? Were these two opposites, or do we know? So I started looking into it, and I was actually surprised by what I found. In fact, the key is found in Genesis chapter 2 and in verse 18. It's a key verse, and it says, "Then the Lord God said, it is not good for man that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." I think that may be a different one. Okay, that's good. The key word there I want you to see is helper. The word helper, among other things, means corresponding to, a counterpart, opposite. You see, I don't need someone who's just like myself. That's really not helping me, right? I can do those things. I need a helper who's someone who is different than me and that does things that I can't do or that I don't do as well. Now, when I really started looking at this, I believe that Adam and Eve, and you can change the slide, I believe that Adam and Eve, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Just leave it. That wasn't what I was looking for. On your personality things, okay? I believe that Eve was a choleric sanguine, and that Adam was a phlegmatic melancholy. You surprised by that? When you look at the fall of man and you see the corresponding punishments, it fits. I started looking at this, and you think about it. Satan comes to Eve, and she's going to tempt her. Let me tell you something about Satan. He knows personalities. One of the things I have in my book is the things that tempt us in our personalities. He comes to her and says, look, if you eat of this fruit, you'll be like God. Cholerics, they struggle with the God syndrome. I want to be the one in control. I want all the knowledge. I want to have all of this power. And they're also willing to eat some forbidden fruit along the way to kind of get ahead. On the other hand, Eve did not want to eat it by herself, did she? You can't have a party with just one person, like a sanguine. Sanguine's thinking in terms, I want somebody to join me, so it gets Adam. Now, Adam, this is why I believe he's a phlegmatic. 1 Timothy 2 and verse 14 tells us that he was not deceived by Satan. Why did he eat of the fruit? Because he was doing what he was told. He was following the crowd. That's typically what your phlegmatics will do. Then you have the fact that I believe he was a melancholy based on the simple fact that God comes to him and says, look, Adam, I want you to name and label and catalog all the animals of the earth. You can't do that to a sanguine. Why? Because a sanguine probably is not going to finish. They're going to find something else exciting to do before they finish cataloging it. And even if they get it down on paper, they're going to lose it somewhere. You know what I'm talking about, you sanguines? You know what I mean. And so it's perfect for them. Now, take that and look at the punishment. What is a punishment? A punishment means something that goes against what you like. Otherwise, if God's punishment was something they wanted, it wouldn't be a punishment. It'd be a reward. So what does he say to Eve? You're not in charge. What's the worst thing you can say to a choleric? You're not going to be the leader. You're going to be in submission. That's what he tells Eve. And then he also tells her, the fun of bearing children. I know some of you women are out there, fun of bearing children. What are you talking about? Listen, it wasn't like that at first. He says there's going to be pain in childbearing. And then what is the punishment for Adam? Adam, you didn't want to be in charge. You didn't step up, so guess what? You're in charge. And not only that, it's going to be difficult. See, these are words phlegmatics don't like to hear. Difficult. They like the word easy. And so with a melancholy who wants everything to be, a certain way, you know what? Adam, you're going to have to deal with weeds and thistles and thorns and things of that sort. You're never going to have that perfection that you're so used to. When you look at the punishment and you look at how it all came about, it absolutely makes sense that this is the way the personalities were. Now, understanding that means that God set forth the personalities in motion. It tells us that when He created that perfect relationship, the perfect person for Adam, He is creating someone who is the opposite, and not just in the terms of male and female. While that certainly was a part of it, the other part of it was the personality stuff. Well, lunchtime arrives. You pull out all the stuff, you get your sandwich meat and your cheese and your bread and all this stuff, and then you pull out your mayonnaise that you had made earlier. You open it up and you realize something. It has these oil spots on the top, little puddles of oil. And you look at that and you think, what happened? Because when I mixed it up, it was a perfect blend. But now, as they say in the culinary world, it broke. Look in your outline. The first thing I want you to see is it's all about me. It's all about me. Listen, that's important for us to understand some things about ourselves. We're not here to build up your ego to a point of, you know what, I'm greater than everybody else. But it is important to understand who you are. And in the book of Psalm 139, 13 and 14, it says, "For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." And it's the word inward that I want you to see here. It comes from a Hebrew word that literally means kidney. And it's talking about an essential organ. Figuratively, though, it spoke of where our passions and desires come out. Folks, guess where your passions and desires come from? Your temperament. So what you need to understand is that whatever temperament you have, it has been fearfully and wonderfully made by the Eternal Father. And so you don't need to look at other people's and say, you know, wish I was like a choleric. I wish I was like this person. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't want to eliminate your weaknesses, but sometimes you feel like, man, I wish I'd have gotten a good personality. No. God created each one of these in a very special way. You need to know that. Here's the second thing I want you to see, and that is opposites attract. Opposites attract. Now, there's two blendings that I want you to see. The first one is the sanguine melancholy marriages. So, as you see up on the chart, that is the complete opposites. When you do these personality tests in your booklets at home later on, or this afternoon, all of these are natural for you to go, sanguine, choleric blend, sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholy, choleric. When you really have to be concerned is when you have your two main, let's just say it's almost 50-50. They are complete opposite of each other. That means there's some masking in there somewhere. And it doesn't mean you're crazy. That's usually somebody says, does that mean I'm crazy? No, it doesn't mean you're crazy. You might be. But that may not necessarily be what it is, right? So it may be you are adapting to something in your life. And I won't go into all of that this morning because we're talking about marriage. So let's talk about the sanguine melancholy marriages for just a minute. So you have this sanguine, and they are this disorganized individual, and they are looking for someone who's organized. So guess what? They find a melancholy, and they are just absolutely amazed by the kind of organization that they have in their life. They also help them to keep a level head because they like to do things on the spur of the moment. The melancholy teaches the sanguine you shouldn't do everything on the spur of the moment. You need to have some planning sometimes. Sometimes you need to step back, think about things because they're analytical, and then move in the right direction. Whereas, on the other hand, you have melancholies. Melancholies, they're introverts. They don't like to be in big crowds. They don't like to go in and think they're going to have to do the talking. So guess what? They're with a sanguine. They don't have to worry about talking because we talk all the time. We talk to people in the elevator and we don't even know, right? Because that's what we do. And so they don't worry about that. Their biggest worry is, if their sanguine partner leaves them as they're going around to everybody. That's what my wife generally has to deal with. On top of that, melancholies can be depressed. We talk about that this morning. And so sanguines, they have that kind of personality. They're very inspirational, encouraging. They're able to help loosen things up a little bit. And it's very possible in the Bible, Aquila and Priscilla were of this personality opposites. But let's notice another one here, and that's the choleric phlegmatic marriages. Choleric phlegmatic marriages that I want you to see. Why do you think these personalities would attract? Well, a phlegmatic is someone, we said, that needs someone to pursue them. They're shy. that is great because a choleric is looking for someone to pursue, right? Also, the choleric does not feel threatened. Their control, their whatever it is, their leadership is not threatened by the phlegmatic because they're not looking to lead. And so the choleric feels comfortable in those situations. And so the phlegmatic needs a spouse who can take control over controversial matters. A choleric thrives on conflict. They actually thrive on debate. They thrive on those things that phlegmatics think, oh, that'd be the worst thing in the world. A choleric is like, hey, I actually kind of enjoy this type of thing. And so they gravitate together based upon those things. You ever met a couple where the husband is bossy, he's impatient, and he's tactless, and they're married to this sweet, pleasant, inoffensive woman? You have just met that personality opposites. If you look at the story of Nabal and Abigail, we looked at them briefly this morning in Bible class. They're a great example. Abraham and Sarah, a great example of this personality type. And by the way, Sarah is the one who's the choleric. Abraham is the phlegmatic, if that doesn't surprise you a little bit there as well. And these are just a few. But we know that. We pretty much understand to some extent what attracted us to each other. That helper that we found or that we hope to find one day. But let's look at this next thing, and that is opposites ignite. Opposites ignite. I can't tell you how many times couples have come into my office, and they've been married for a few weeks, months, maybe a few years, and they say, I don't know why I ever married this person. Now, it wasn't that long ago when they were dating and they could do no wrong. You know, I mean, they were just the best thing in the world. In fact, you're riding up on cloud nine and you're thinking, oh no, the only fault, the only negative they have in their life is they love me too much. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. What happened is that you saw their positives. And when you're dating, folks, isn't that what you do? Come on, guys, you know you do it. You do the breath test, right? You're going to smell, make sure you don't stink. Ladies, what do? Every time you go by a mirror or every time you go by a car and see the window in your reflection, you're checking your hair because you're always doing the positive things and showing forth that positive in your life. And then you get married. And you don't just come off of cloud nine, you fall off of cloud nine. And all of a sudden you're dealing with issues and things and maybe children in your lives and all of these stresses with work, and you're with each other all the time, and all of a sudden things are different. It's not that they're different, it's you're seeing their negatives. Mayonnaise, milk, cream, butter, all of those are what we call emulsions. They are made up primarily of like dairy fat, oil, and liquid, usually water. And you've always heard the term, oil and water don't mix. And you can blend them together, and they look like this nice creamy substance, but because they come from differing ingredients, differing substances, they will begin to pull away. And if they're left to themselves, they will pull away completely. In personalities, when you find the strengths of someone and you see this perfect blending, you see how they really meet you in your life, that is fantastic. But then one day you realize you're from different substances. And you realize there are some differences. And it's not so much that they're a different person, it's simply you're seeing their negatives. So at that point, the fun-loving sanguine now appears to be disorganized and scatterbrained and repetitious. That confident choleric, they appear to be bossy and insensitive and stubborn. The organized melancholy has turned into someone who's hard to please. They're pessimistic and too sensitive. Even the personality that everybody grows to love, the phlegmatic, they have turned into this lazy, compromising, timid worrier. The fun-loving sanguine who fell in love with that deep, organized melancholy with their daily planners. Now, to stick to this plan all the time, it just seems boring. The introverted melancholy who fell in love with that outgoing personality of the sanguine doesn't like the fact that they're willing to talk to anybody and they exaggerate a lot of their stories. The overachieving choleric who fell in love with the quiet sense of humor of that phlegmatic now thinks maybe they're a little bit too quiet for their nature. And the peaceful phlegmatic who liked the take charge attitude of the choleric is getting tired of being bossed around and feeling like that their opinions don't matter at all. And all of a sudden what you have is conflict. And this conflict in personalities comes out in all kinds of different ways in a marriage. You see it in finances. Okay, we sanguines, we are very spontaneous people. We like to spend our money on things all of a sudden, something that's exciting. That's why my wife doesn't want me to watch infomercials, right? No, you can't have that processor that you'll never use. I'm sorry. Yeah, but it's so cool. That's what sanguines do. We want to buy things that are fun. Okay? You have the melancholy, and they're thinking in terms of the future. They're thinking in terms of planning. They're thinking in terms of, hey, we've got rent next month. We might not want to spend all that money on that stuff. And so you've got that conflict. Or maybe what you have is you have a choleric, and they want their children to be well behaved. They want them to excel in everything that they do. And you've got the phlegmatic. They just want to roll with the punches. They don't want to put high achievements on their children. They just kind of want things to go and to flow. And so these conflicts rise out of all kind of places. This is just a couple of them, finances and raising children. And you see it in all other kind of places as well. And if you really want a good fight, then try to change your partner's personality to be like yours. Because here's what's going to happen. Even if they change, listen to this, even if they're just like you know what you're going to say? They've changed. They're not the same person I married. No, they're like you and you can't stand it. Right? And then you go out and you find somebody else, and guess what happens? You find the same kind of person that you had before. Because we're looking for people to meet our needs. And even how we argue is different. I am an extrovert, extreme extrovert. I'm a sanguine choleric. We are very animated people. We talk with our hands, right? We're always moving, and it sounds like we're yelling. I'm not yelling right now. I promise you I'm not. I can really yell if I want to, but this is not yelling. But to an introvert, they hear that as yelling. Whereas the introverts, what do? You clam up. I don't want to talk about this right now. I just need to think about these things right now. And so the extroverts are thinking, you know what, they really don't care about the relationship because I want to get this out right now and deal with it right now. And the melancholies are thinking, I can't believe they're doing this. They won't even let me have time to think. It's like they don't care about me at all. And all of a sudden, even how we argue is different, right? Opposites ignite. But the last thing I want you to see in your outline is opposites learning to blend. There's something that can be done with emulsions. It's known as emulsifiers. And generally these are things like mustard and egg yolk. And they contain substances in them that help to blend things like oil and water and to put kind of a permanent barrier around them. So there are things that we can do in personality, in relationships, that are emulsifiers for marriage. The first thing I want you to see is understand your own personality. I think that's important. You need to understand your own personality. The Bible says we need to look inward, doesn't it? It says we need to examine ourselves. And so when you take these personality tests, I've told you, every one of us have strengths and weaknesses. But you've got to realize you've got weaknesses. And so you need to take a close look at yourself and say, you know what? The problem that we're having in this marriage isn't me. As a sanguine, am I telling great stories or am I exaggerating the truth? Am I being spontaneous or is it just me being disorganized? As a choleric, am I displaying characteristics of a strong leader or am I just being bossy? Am I showing my ability to make quick decisions, or is it that I'm being impatient? As a melancholy, is it just because I'm trying to be highly organized, or have I become obsessive? Is it my ability to have a long-term memory, or is it the fact that I'm not a very forgiving person? As a phlegmatic, am I just easygoing, or am I being lazy? So we have to look at ourselves. It may be you. It may not be you. But the first thing you need to do in your marriages, and you need to look at the issues that you're having in your life, is look at yourself and say, is it me? Personalities is all about understanding your strengths, honing in on those strengths, and eliminating weaknesses in your life. Because the more you eliminate weaknesses, you become more like the strengths of the other personalities. And we'll talk about a little more about that in just a second. Here's the second thing. Understand your partner's personality. One of the reasons I do this and I go around and I talk about this is because it's important that we understand each other. It's important you understand the people you work with, understand the people in your home, understanding the people in this church. Because that goes a long way. Because here's what happens. You figure out what things that you need to do. You understand those people a little bit better, and you know what buttons to push, right? You know how to encourage them. You know what kind of things you think they would do well in. But you also know what buttons not to push. And it also helps you to understand sometimes when they're acting a certain way, it's not personal. I think a lot of times in marriages, we think that, well, they hate me. And it may not be that at all. Sometimes you can just look back and say, you know what? That's just their personality. Man, that's huge when you can get to that point in your life. It doesn't mean you can't deal with things from here, but it just helps to realize it's not personal. So I think that was really one of the main thrusts of Paul in talking in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And constantly, the husband pleasing his wife and the wife trying to please her husband. Here's the third thing. Learn to compromise. We can talk about personalities all day long, but here's the thing. In marriage relationships, you're never going to agree 100%. You're just not. And so you have to learn to compromise. Now, I know you phlegmatics are out there like, yeah, I was wondering when you're going to get to this. It's just we don't talk, and we would have told you a long time ago, right? Cholerics, you're going to struggle with this because, you like to make very quick decisions, and usually your decisions are right. I'm sorry if you've got a choleric sitting beside you right now, but the fact of the matter is, choleric, some things are not worth fighting over. Some things you just need to let go. When my wife and I got married, we learned to compromise. I am a messy sanguine. She is a perfectionist melancholy. And when we got married, I lived out of a clothes basket. Okay? She lived out of dresser drawers. What's that about? And it's like she thinks that's what they're for. And I'm like, no, that's what a clothes basket is for. Because then you take the clean clothes and you put them in the basket. And then when you get up, it's perfect because you got holes all around it and you can see on top. And it's all right. If there's a fire, I'm grabbing my basket. I'm out. I got all my clothes. If there's a fire in a melancholy, they're going to burn up because they got to go to all those drawers, right? Well, we compromised. And my wife said, okay, look, you can have this system of yours, but at least keep it in the closet in case we have friends over and they think you're crazy. I said, no problem. Now, I'll let you know for you melancholies today, my wife and I, we've been married almost 25 years. I now am living out of dresser drawers. But she complains now because I'll close a drawer and a little sock will be sticking up, and she gets all upset about that. I don't understand. So you have to learn to compromise. Compromise is good in a marriage. All right, here's the last thing. Be controlled by the Spirit. Folks, this is so important. I believed it was so important that 2 of the chapters in my book deal with that. I dealt with 2 chapters in this because that really helps us to hone in on our strengths and eliminate weaknesses in our lives. Galatians chapter 5, 22 and 26 says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law, and those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not be conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. And when you begin to really study these, and we don't have time to really study these this morning, but if you want to be a better person, a better Christian, a better husband or wife, then you learn the fruit of the Spirit. And you continue to allow it to grow in your life. Because what happens is a sanguine will learn patience and peace and gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. A choleric will learn to love, be at peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. A melancholic will learn to love, joy, peace, and goodness. And a phlegmatic will learn to have joy, faithfulness, and peace. You may say, wait a second, I thought they were the peaceful phlegmatics. Read it. It's about an internal peace, not just what's happening around you. And sometimes phlegmatics, they hold a lot of things in and they do not feel a real peacefulness. So you study those things. And I promise you, you will begin to eliminate weaknesses in your life. You will become more like the strengths of the others, and you will be more like Jesus. Because Jesus was the perfect personality. You look it up and you will see Him exemplify it, because He had all of its strengths and none of the weaknesses. Your marriage can be great, but you got to work at your marriage. And part of working on that marriage is understanding each other. And as we get ready to conclude here, I cannot stress enough to people, personality is important, but being a child of God, two Christians working together, and that love and the forgiveness that we find in Christ, folks, that will carry you in areas that you never thought you could go before. And you may be here and you're a Christian, but you know what? You hadn't been acting like it. Maybe you act like it here, but you're not acting like it at home. Or maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe your spouse is, but you look at yourself and say, really, I'm not. Listen, there's nothing, a greater imbalance in a marriage than that. And I can tell you, you want a great marriage, then be married to Christ. Because there is where we find it, folks. And it starts with this faith in Jesus Christ. Not just, I believe that Jesus lived. I'm talking about a real saving faith. To a point you want to change. You're not happy just to say, well, that's just who I am. I've got weaknesses and I've got strengths, and that's just who I am. But to say, you know what? I want to be like Jesus. And I'm going to transform my life to be like His. And then to be willing to confess His name before others and to be baptized into the name of Jesus Christ, so that we can be saved, forgiveness of sins, so that we can be added to the church, and so that the gift of the Spirit will now come to us. Acts 2 and verse 38. And we can really begin to make our marriages great. But more importantly, is the relationship that you have now with the Father. If you're subject to the invitation in any way, I urge you to come now as together we stand and as we sing.